Kieran Aldrich woke up in a devastated field, the gray, cloudy sky covering what was left of the world. The cold wind cut through his skin like a sharp blade, and the smell of ashes and destruction filled the air. He had no idea how he got there. Memories? No. Just fragments of something far away, like echoes that kept dragging themselves towards him. Kieran's name didn't feel like it meant anything anymore, just a tag on a body that didn't recognize itself. Every step he took felt like walking over a destroyed past, through ruins that used to be prosperous villages. The beasts of ruin, corrupted by the never-ending war, roamed the frozen lands, but even they weren't the biggest threat to Kieran. Nah, the biggest danger was inside him. The memories, they weren't his. He struggled to get up, feeling the pain in muscles he didn't even remember how to use. The wind brought a figure, a shadow that materialized in front of him. Celine Vayler. Her presence was a mix of mystery and pain. Her eyes, once bright, now carried the weight of broken promises and deep mourning that Kieran could almost feel physically. She was someone from the past, a memory of times he didn't understand. But somehow she knew about him, about what he was and what was waiting for him. The crown of ashes, she said, like it was something he already knew. Kieran didn't know, but he felt it. The call of the crown was something deep, something running through his blood. He didn't know what it was, but the feeling that he'd been chosen for something bigger consumed him. And there was no escaping it. Celine stepped closer, and with a look mixing desperation and determination, she talked about the monsters they'd face. Beasts of ruin. Deformed creatures corrupted by the War of 1,000 Winters. Kieran didn't hesitate. The need to fight was in his soul like some ancestral memory. He lifted what was left of his sword, feeling the weight of the blade like an extension of his own doubt. They moved forward, facing the beasts with a fury that seemed to come from the heart of chaos itself. Every strike felt like a release of something he couldn't control, like the war was happening inside him, reflected in the world around him. When the battle finally stopped, Kieran felt the weight of the memories haunting him. They weren't just fragments. They were living memories of lives he hadn't lived, battles in far-off kingdoms, and a promise of a destiny he still didn't get. Something was whispering in his mind, something he couldn't ignore. And deep down he knew, the crown of ashes was tied to all of this. The war, the ruins, the exiled sovereign. Celine, by his side, seemed further away than ever. She knew something about what was happening, something Kieran couldn't access. The tension was thick between them, like they were both holding on to the edge of something bigger they couldn't control. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. The exiled sovereign, she murmured, like she was remembering something lost. He's what's waiting. The key to the crown and the key to the end of everything. The words echoed in Kieran's mind, like an unsaid prophecy, a secret shared between the past and the present. But what scared Kieran more than the corrupted creatures or the forces threatening to swallow the world was the emptiness inside him, a lack of identity that was consuming him more and more. He wasn't just a warrior. He wasn't just a lost soul. He was the key to something much bigger. And that something wouldn't be easily unlocked. But he was ready to go beyond the limits of what he knew, even if it meant facing the shadows within himself. The road ahead would be dangerous, but Kieran had no choice. The crown of ashes was calling, and he couldn't ignore it. He felt the weight of something bigger than himself, something he needed to understand, not just to survive but to figure out what was at stake. The ruins around him were just a reflection of what he was about to discover about himself. And the name of the exiled sovereign kept echoing in his mind. He knew that name, those fragments of memory, meant more than any sword or spell. It was the fate of a ruined world and maybe the end of everything he knew. Kieran's journey was just beginning. But as he looked at Celine, he realized that the real challenge was ahead. What would he be willing to sacrifice to find the crown of ashes? What would he lose in the process? The echo of a prophecy grew louder, and destiny was waiting for him, wrapped in shadows and ashes. Kieran Aldrich felt the weight of the journey with every step he took, the weight of a world that seemed to forget about him with every dawn. He looked at the road ahead, covered in eternal snow and marked by the scars of past battles, feeling a tightness in his chest that he couldn't explain. Celine Vayler, by his side, seemed quieter than usual, her eyes lost in something far away. She knew something was about to happen, and Kieran couldn't shake the feeling that he was the key to it all. But why him? Why this feeling of being someone he wasn't, someone with a destiny he didn't get? Around him, the world was a ruin. shadows of ancient glories that would never return. The war, which had ravaged the lands for 1,000 winters, had left everything scarred, like an unhealable wound. And yet, he still felt the power of the Crown of Ashes calling, something in his blood that seemed to connect with the very ruins surrounding him. As they walked through these desolate lands, Kieran started having visions, quick flashes of a past he hadn't lived. He saw battles, castles on fire, and figures with unfamiliar faces, all fighting to save or destroy something beyond his understanding. He saw himself in fallen kingdoms, in broken alliances, and vows made to people he never knew existed. It was like his soul was intertwined with a fate he couldn't escape, and it terrified him. These weren't just memories, they were fragments of past lives, burned into his mind with no explanation. Celine, noticing his unease, stopped and looked at him with a mixture of sympathy and concern. A mix of compassion and fear. Something inside her knew what he was going through, but she couldn't tell him the whole truth just yet. Something was stopping her. Alaric, the third member of their little group, was up front, his eyes always scanning. He knew more than he let on, but Kieran could tell the guy had his own scars and secrets. "The exiled circle is closer than we thought," Alaric said, his voice low and filled with tension that Kieran couldn't ignore. That dark cult was lurking in their shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike. They had a particular interest in what Kieran represented, but exactly what that was he didn't know. The Exiled Circle, a group that claimed to serve the shadows, had their eyes set on something bigger than it seemed. What they wanted? No one knew for sure. Maybe the answers were closer than they thought, but the price of finding them would be higher than any of them could pay. As they moved deeper into the frozen lands, Celine finally spoke. "The Crown of Ashes, it's both a prison and a key. It can trap the soul of the exiled sovereign or set him free. What this means, Kieran, is that your connection to this crown is more than just some twist of fate. You weren't chosen, you were forged for this." Kieran looked at her, a chill running down his spine. How did she know that? He couldn't be the chosen one. He couldn't be the guardian of this curse. But the fragments of memories, the visions he had, were feeling more real, more intense. He was more than he seemed, but exactly what was he? The fear of his own identity began to consume him. He didn't know who to trust anymore, or what to do with all of this. Celine, like a shadow from the past, seemed to be the only one who understood the weight of the situation. But Kieran couldn't just blindly trust her words. There was something in her eyes, an unspoken pain he couldn't ignore. What did she know and wasn't saying? The exiled circle was getting closer, and they needed to uncover the truth fast. But Kieran wasn't ready to face what was coming. He still didn't fully understand the depth of the sacrifice this journey would require. Suddenly, the land around them began to change. The snow gave way to thick fog, as if the air itself was stained by the curse of ancient wars. Something was happening. He could feel the eyes of the exiled circle watching, waiting. Something was about to be revealed. Kieran's fate was tied to his own fear, and he needed to decide whether he was ready to face the truth or if he would get lost forever in the shadows of the past. But one thing was clear, the Crown of Ashes wasn't just an artifact. It was a sentence, and Kieran had no way out. The journey was just beginning, and the choices he made now could shape the future of everyone. The cold wind cut through the silence of the night as Kieran, Celine, and Alaric approached the ancient fortress that had served as home and refuge for the members of the exiled circle for centuries. The structure, now in ruins, exhaled an air of abandonment and betrayal. The wind howled through the broken walls, as if the echoes of ancient wars still whispered through the stones. Every step toward the wide-open gate seemed to carry more weight than the last. Fear and curiosity mixed in Kieran's chest as he felt the Crown of Ashes, tied around his neck, pulsing with dark energy, almost as if it were trying to rip his soul out. He didn't understand why it called to him so strongly, as if it had a mind of its own. But he knew that here, within these walls, were the answers he had been searching for. Celine, with her sharp and cautious gaze, moved ahead. "Here, Kieran, this isn't just about power anymore. It's about control. They won't just accept you. They'll try to turn you into a tool, use you until there's nothing left." Her words sounded like a warning, but also a reality he didn't want to face. The exiled circle wasn't just any group. They were masters of manipulation, planting doubts and using them to corrode the minds of anyone who came close. And Kieran knew he was their target. But there was something inside him that wouldn't let him back down. The destiny he had to fulfill was bigger than any fear. As they entered the fortress, the air felt thicker, filled with a malevolent energy that made Kieran's skin crawl. Every room, every abandoned hallway seemed to tell a story of pain and regret. But what disturbed them the most was the feeling that they weren't alone. Someone was there, watching them, waiting for the right moment to act. Then they found the main chamber, a large room lit only by the pale light of the moon streaming through openings in the walls. The floor was covered with ancient symbols, and in the center of the room, a massive stone chair, seemingly carved by ancient and immortal hands, stood empty as if waiting for its next occupant. Alaric stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the chair. "The crown of ashes was made for you, Kieran. There's no turning back." His words, simple but profound, echoed in Kieran's mind like a final sentence. He looked at the chair, feeling the irresistible pull emanating from it, as if he were being drawn there with no control. Celine, however, grabbed his arm. "Don't do it, Kieran. Don't give in to that shadow. There's something much bigger at play here and they want you to get lost in it." But Kieran's voice was firm when he responded, "I need to understand what's going on, Celine. I need to know why they want me." Before anyone could react, a dark presence filled the room. From the depths of the chamber, hooded figures emerged, moving like shadows, their eyes glowing with a macabre light. The exiled circle was here, ready to make their move. But Kieran didn't back down. He knew this moment had arrived. It was time to face his own fears, the forces trying to use him, and finally, the truth behind his connection to the Crown of Ashes. A figure stepped out from the shadows and Kieran immediately recognized him. He was a tall man, wearing a black cloak that seemed to swallow up the light around him. But it was his eyes that really caught Kieran's attention. They were the same eyes he had seen in his visions, the eyes of the past calling out to him. "Kieran Aldrich, the moment has finally arrived. You are the chosen one, but not in the way you think." The man's voice echoed like a dark melody, filled with power and wisdom. He wasn't just a member of the circle. He was the leader, the heart of the organization, and he knew Kieran better than he could ever imagine. "You were forged for this, Kieran. The Crown of Ashes is no blessing. It's a curse that, in the end, destroys everything you are. But it's also the only thing that can save us. You will take your place as the new ruler, or you will destroy us all." The air in the room seemed to freeze with the leader's words. Kieran felt the weight of that decision. The shadow of the crown was wrapping around him, and he knew his fight wasn't just against the circle of exiles. It was against himself, against what he would become if he accepted what they offered him. But what could he do? He had no choice. Fate had marked him, and the forces at play were bigger than he could understand. The sacrifice asked of Kieran wasn't something he could avoid. However, there was something in his heart that wouldn't let him simply accept what the circle wanted. He had a bigger mission than being a puppet of fate. He was more than that. "I won't give in to what you want, leader. I'll find the truth no matter the cost. And when I discover what the Crown of Ashes really is, you'll see what happens when you mess with someone's fate." The tension in the room grew, and the leader smiled, like he had been expecting this response. "So you know, Kieran, the true power comes from choice, and you've just made yours. But get ready because now the real battle begins." The sound of the leader's words still echoed in Kieran's mind as he watched the mysterious figures surrounding him. Celine and Alaric stood by his side, ready for any move, but Kieran knew nothing could prepare them for what was to come. The Crown of Ashes, now resting on his head, pulsed with an even stronger intensity, as if it were alive, as if it were in tune with the events around him. The feeling of power was almost overwhelming, but there was something else, something dark, that made him question if he truly understood the full extent of what he held. "Do you feel that, Kieran?" Alaric asked, his voice low, though there was a hint of worry. "This power is not normal. Something's wrong. You're losing control." Alaric's words weren't just an observation. They were a warning, but Kieran couldn't ignore what he felt. The Crown of Ashes seemed to whisper promises, promises of unlimited power, of control over fate. But what did it really want? And why him? It all seemed like a web of lies, but Kieran knew he couldn't back down now. "I know, Alaric," Kieran replied, his voice cold. "But backing down now isn't an option. The Circle of Exiles. They won't stop until I join them. And if I let them keep going, who knows what they'll do to what's left of the world?" He looked at Celine, who kept her eyes locked on the leader's figure, watching every move. She didn't say anything, but her eyes reflected the doubts swirling in Kieran's mind. She knew how much this was consuming him, but she also knew he had a bigger purpose. The leader, still silent, watched the scene with a satisfied smile. He knew Kieran was on the verge of making a decision that would change not only his life but the future of everything. The crown of ashes was testing him, pushing him to a crossroads. But Kieran couldn't allow himself to be manipulated. Not anymore. "What do you want from me, leader?" Kieran asked, his voice now firmer. "Tell me what you really expect me to do." The leader took a step forward, his imposing presence intensifying. He knew the time had come to reveal the truth. The game was about to change, and Kieran would have to make his choice. No more excuses, no more hesitation. "The crown of ashes, Kieran, is not just an artifact of power," the leader began, his voice full of deep mystery. "It is the key to awakening what has been sealed for a long time. What you carry, what you possess, is the final link needed to unleash the true power of the exile's bloodline. What you do with it, young man, will depend on you. But know this, times are changing. The balance between chaos and order is about to break. The question is, will you be the bearer of destruction or the savior?" The silence after those words was deafening, as if the very air itself was holding its breath, waiting for Kieran's answer. He looked at the crown, his eyes glowing with the dark light surrounding it. The weight of the leader's words, the weight of the decision, carried him like an anchor. The pressure was enormous, but Kieran felt that, at the same time, there was a growing force within him, a flame of resistance pushing him to fight against what the Circle of Exiles wanted him to become. He wasn't a pawn in this game, he wouldn't be anyone's puppet. "I won't be what you want me to be," Kieran responded, his voice sounding firm and unshakable. "I won't be anyone's instrument of destruction. Whatever you plan with that crown, I'll stop it. I'm not your ally. I'm something else." The leader didn't look surprised, but there was a slight curve to his lips, like he'd been expecting this response. He took a step back, and the figures with him started to move, getting into a strategic formation. They weren't ready to give up on Kieran. Not yet. "So, you've made your choice, Kieran Aldrich," the leader said, his eyes locked on the young man. "Now get ready for what's coming. Your journey has just begun, and you'll soon find out that the real price of freedom is higher than you think." His words sounded like a sentence. But Kieran knew this wouldn't be the end. He couldn't let it be. Celine stepped closer, placing her hand on Kieran's shoulder. "We'll face this together," she said, her voice filled with determination. Alaric nodded, and the three of them braced for whatever came next. The exiled circle might try to bring them down, but Kieran knew he had something they'd never have: the will to fight for his own fate, no matter how dark the path ahead seemed. And then, as if a signal had been given, the fortress doors slammed shut behind them, sealing them in as they began a new chapter. Kieran was more aware than ever that his battle wasn't just against the exiled circle. It was against something much bigger, much older, something that threatened not just his life but the very fabric of reality. The crossroads were in front of him, and he had to move forward no matter how hard the road was. The sky was getting darker as Kieran and his allies made their way deeper into the uncharted lands, their journey taking them further into the forbidden forest. The wind was blowing hard, carrying with it a sense of change, like nature itself knew what was coming. Kieran could feel it, each step taking him closer to something unknown, yet inevitable. The ashen crown, now firmly placed on his head, felt heavier with each moment, as if it was testing his resolve, waiting for him to give in to its power. But he wouldn't. Not now. "We're getting close," Celine said, her voice low but tense. "The exiled circle must be up ahead, waiting for us." Kieran didn't respond right away. His gaze was fixed ahead, where the darkness thickened, like a malignant presence was drawing near. He knew the final battle was waiting, but it wasn't just a physical fight. It was an inner struggle, a clash of forces he barely understood, but knew he had to win to ensure the world kept turning the way he knew it. Alaric, walking just behind Kieran, seemed tenser than usual. His eyes were sharp, his muscles ready for whatever came their way. He knew Kieran was in danger. Whatever the exiled wanted was about to be revealed, and the ashen crown was the key to it all. But whoever held it, whoever controlled it, would have the power to decide everyone's fate. The weight of that responsibility was crushing, and Alaric felt it with every step. They reached a wide open field where the dense, dark vegetation gave way to an empty circle. In the center stood an altar, surrounded by hooded figures, all eyes on Kieran, waiting. The leader was there, wearing a smile that showed no compassion. He knew this was the defining moment. Kirin hadn't given in yet, but the forces gathered here weren't going to back down easily. Kirin Aldrich, the leader's voice echoed across the field. You've made your choice. Now the only way forward is to face the destiny that's been laid out for you. The power of the Ashen Crown can't be ignored any longer. Either you join us or... He paused, and the silence stretched for a moment, broken only by the wind whispering around them. Or you'll be destroyed and your bloodline with you. Kirin felt the weight of the moment pressing in on him. The power of the crown seemed inviting, but he knew giving in to it would mean his loss, his erasure. He looked at his allies, Selene, Alaric, and saw in their eyes the same feeling. This wasn't just a fight for him, but for everyone who still had hope. The truth was, by using the crown he would be choosing to change the course of history. But what kind of history would it be? He couldn't just be another pawn in the exiled's game. I choose my own path, Kirin declared firmly. I'm not your puppet and no one else will be. The Ashen Crown does not control my fate. He raised his hand, feeling the energy pulsing inside him, mixed with the feeling of fear and strength. The crown's power tried to seep into his mind, trying to convince him he wasn't strong enough to resist. But Kirin refused to give in. You really think you can resist? The leader smiled, but now there was something threatening in his expression. Destiny is written, Kirin. You don't have a choice. But Kirin, with his eyes steady and his heart resolute, answered, I create my own destiny. And today it doesn't end with you. He felt a wave of energy spreading through his body, the Ashen Crown burning as if trying to tear itself off his head. But Kirin resisted, the power rising from his own determination becoming stronger than any outside force. He knew this fight was more than physical. It was a battle of wills, and he wouldn't let anyone take control of his life. You forgot, leader, Kirin went on, now with a defiant grin. I'm not that lost kid anymore. I'm the last of the Aldrich bloodline, and I won't let you or anyone else define my fate. He took a step forward, feeling the crown's energy heating up even more. A golden glow radiated from his skin, wrapping him in an aura of power. The ground around him trembled, and the hooded figures backed away, scared of the power Kirin was now exuding. The battle was quick. The exiled circle's forces tried to summon dark magic, but the light Kirin was giving off, fueled by his own determination, shattered their defenses. In one final attempt, the leader charged, but Kirin, now stronger than ever, didn't use the crown as a weapon of destruction. Instead, he used it as a channel to unleash the power that had been sealed inside him. In one move, he broke the chains binding the exiled's power to the crown, releasing a wave of energy that made the sky light up with an explosion of light. When the dust finally settled, Kirin stood tall, breathing heavy but knowing he had made the right call. The leader and his followers were gone, defeated. The exiled circle was destroyed, but the war wasn't over. The Ashen Crown was now in his hands, but Kirin knew the fight for a better future had only just begun. Selene approached, smiling. You did what you had to do. Now the world can heal. Alaric nodded, his face lighter than before. Kirin looked at the Ashen Crown, now free from the weight of the choice it had carried. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but for the first time he wasn't scared of what the future had in store. The fight for a better world had begun, but Kirin Aldrich wasn't alone anymore. And that, in itself, was a huge step toward freedom. The Ashen Crown had been defeated, but the real challenge now was keeping the promise of a future free from the shadow it had cast over everything. Kirin gazed at the horizon, where the sky was slowly beginning to clear after the battle. The Ashen Crown, now free of the weight of an unrelenting choice, rested in his hands like a symbol of everything he had overcome. It was more than a magical artifact. It represented the true fight for freedom and personal choice. He had taken down the exiled, but the real victory was in how he had claimed his own freedom, without giving in to the destiny others tried to impose. Selene and Alaric walked up, sharing the silence, but knowing that their lives would never be the same. They had witnessed Kirin's strength, his courage, and now they saw the impact of his actions. The world was still far from peaceful, but a new hope was blooming where there had once been darkness. You did the impossible, Kirin, Alaric said, his voice steady but full of respect. And now the world's got a chance. A chance you created. Kirin looked at his friends, feeling a wave of gratitude. They'd been by his side since the start, and together, they'd faced what many thought was impossible. But their journey was far from over. Selene, with a subtle smile, added, "No matter what happens now, you showed everyone that true power comes from choice. And that's something no one can take from you." Kieran felt a renewed strength in her words. The battle for freedom, for choice, wasn't over. But now he had the courage to face it, whatever challenge lay ahead. "Our work's just beginning," Kieran replied, looking toward the horizon, where a new dawn was starting to rise. He knew the future would be shaped by his choices, and he wasn't going to let anyone take control of his destiny anymore. The Ashen Crown, now powerless, would be remembered not as a weapon of destruction, but as a catalyst for true change. As the sun rose, lighting up the devastated land, Kieran felt a hope he'd never known before. The road ahead would be long, but he wasn't scared anymore. The world was in his hands and he was ready to rebuild it. With the strength of his own determination and the certainty that, together, nothing would be impossible. And so, the cycle of the Ashen Crown came to an end, but Kieran, Selene, and Alaric's legacy would continue to inspire generations to choose their own path. The world might have been on the brink of ruin, but with the courage of one man, it was beginning to rise again. Because in the end, the true Ashen Crown wasn't a crown of power, but a crown of choice. And that no one could take. If you like this story, don't forget to drop a comment, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notifications bell for more stories like this. I'll see you in the next video.